Good afternoon, everybody. This is Elliot with the MPO coordinator. The Let's wait a couple of minutes to see if we could get some of the members that are missing from the meeting. Thank you.
Hey, sir. Hey, we all.
Yeah, let's see. I'm sorry, let me do something here.
Greenville 301 5 on screen.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Greenville Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Technical Committee meeting. This is the I believe we have reached quorum. If Rachel can confirm.
Kevin Mulligan.
Here.
Lisa Kirby. Thomas Barnett, Shantae Gooby,
Here.
Rick DeCesar,
Here.
Stacy Pickford,
Here.
Ryan Mayers,
Ryan would not be here.
Ann Wall,
Here.
James Rhodes,
Here.
Jonas Hill,
Here.
Michael Taylor,
Here.
Ben Williams, Terry Parker, Brian Jones,
Here.
Matthew Livingston, Stephen Smith,
Here.
Richard Zeck, Jeff Cavanis, Steve Hamilton, Liam Hogan Rivera,
Here.
Lynn White,
Here.
Haywood Daltrey, Bailey Hardin,
Here.
Kevin Richards,
Here.
and William Bagnell.
Here.
All right, back to you, Kevin. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see everyone. Just a housekeeping point that our next meeting would be probably in person. More information on where that would be held. Upcoming. Look for an email from Iliad on that. All right. So I'll just go over the agenda, approval of the agenda. First, I'll read the ethics, awareness, and conflict of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. All right, but the agenda, first we'll have a public comment period, then the annual election of technical coordinating committee chair and vice chair for 2022. Consent agenda, which we'll need to approve. Approval of the December 15th joint governing meeting minutes. Approval of amendments to the 2020 through 2029 MTIP resolution, which Iliad will go over. A STIP modification resolution for a transit project edition. The regular agenda will have a 2020 traffic count data presentation by Kerry Morrow and Jamie Vieira. The statewide transportation improvement program and prioritization process update, self-certification of the Greenville urban area MPO transportation planning process, approval of the next item will be approval of the Greenville urban area MPO fiscal year unified planning work program. And then item 6, there'll be other items discussion from Division 2, Len White, Diane Hampton, Transportation Planning Division, Liam Hogan Rivera, Integrated Mobility Division, Nick Morrison, as well as MPO staff updates from Iliad. Last, we'll go over the upcoming meeting schedule, then we'll adjourn. Do I have an approval, a motion to approve the agenda while we're on this, while we're virtual? We'll need to, if anyone approves if the person who approves the agenda will need to, or delivers the motion to approve the agenda will need to state their name.
This is Mike Taylor, motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second, James Rhodes.
Okay. Rachel, you'll need to take a roll call. We have Mike Taylor with a motion to approve and James Rhodes with a second.
Kevin Mulligan.
Aye.
Shantae Gooby,
Aye.
Rick DeCesar, Rick DeCesar,
Aye.
Stacy Pickford,
Aye.
Ann Wall,
Aye.
Rachel,
Sorry.
just, so the person will need to say their name and the I.
okay.
Rick DeCesar, aye.
Stacy
Stacy.
Bickford, aye.
Ann Wall,
Ann Wall, aye.
James Rhodes,
James Rhodes, aye.
Jonas Hill,
Jonas Hill,
Michael Taylor,
Mike Taylor, yes.
Brian Jones,
Brian Jones, aye.
Stephen Smith,
Stephen Smith, aye.
Liam Hogan Rivera,
Liam Hogan Rivera, aye.
Lynn White,
Lynn White, aye.
Bailey Harden,
Bailey Harden, aye.
Kevin Richards,
Kevin Richards, aye.
and William Bagnell.
William Bagnell, aye.
All right,
And,
motion carries. So we'll
And
move on.
share. I just want to have a quick comment regarding the voting. The Stacy, since Stacy Pickford is the alternate for Rick, their votes will count as one. So you could either have Rick to make the motions.
Okay, I will just call on Rick since he's the main from here on out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Iliad. Iliad or Rachel, is there any registered comments from the public?
And people have registered to attend the meeting, but none have expressed requested time for comments.
Okay. So seeing that there's no public comment here, we'll move on to the next item, which be election of the technical coordinating committee chair and vice chair for 2022. Iliad, you want to discuss this?
And this is our yearly, we decide our TCC and chair and TCC vice chair, and we have been we have been delighted by our current chair and our vice chair. So I think it's up to the members to decide who will be the next year's vice chair and vice chair. So it is open for the members to assign or vote, recommend somebody to assume the position, I mean.
Mr. Chair, this is James. I recommend that we, or make a motion that we keep the same slate of officers we currently have.
All right, we have a motion to from Mr. James Rhodes to keep the same chair and vice chair for 2022. Any more discussion of that? Do we have a second of that or any other suggestions on the chair and vice chair?
This is Ann Wall, and I will second that motion.
And you wish to become the committee chair?
No, Kevin, I would echo Elliot's comments. You're doing a great job.
Oh, thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
All right, so there we have a motion to a motion and a second for to keep the same chair and vice chair. All those in favor, any other comments on that? Any other suggestions before we take a roll call on that? All right, seeing none, Rachel, can you go through a roll call on that?
I will, but before I do, I wanted to let you know that I spoke with Valerie earlier, and in terms of the meeting and doing a roll call on every item that needs to be approved, because we have so many.
There's a better way. Bring it on.
We can take a motion and a second for each item, and then at the very end of the meeting, do a roll call for everything that had a motion or a second at once collectively.
And it serves like a slated vote, and the capital area MPO actually practice this method.
We can continue doing it every time or at the end if you.
I would strongly recommend we do it at the end then. So, all right, so so we have a motion and a second. We have a motion from James Rhodes and a second from Ann Wall, and we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I will just mention or caution, unless any member would like to remove this item to the slated vote, we will continue. So if you could ask them.
All right, seeing no comments on that, let's move to the consent agenda. Ilya, do you want to take us through the items A, B, and C here for?
Yes, in page 3, you will see the first item is the minutes from our previous meeting. It was a joint meeting on December 15. The minutes are page 3 up to page 8. And page 7. And hold on, switching my screens here. And then the next item is the amendments to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. This is a standard procedure that we do, keeping up to date our planning document, our program, Transportation Improvement Program document with the states. So for this amendment, we are adding the replacement of Oxford Road Bridge over Meeting House Branch in Greenville, set to start in FY23, the process at our request. The second project is adding the replacement of Rock Spring Road Bridge over Greens Mill Run in Greenville, added to FY24 at the request of the MPO. And then the third and last is the replace Jack Jones Road Bridge. This request, instead of adding, it will be actually deleting the project from the STIP, as it will be using highway bridge funds. They are not required to be in the STIP. And we are requesting the TCC, just like the we are requesting the TCC to recommend the TAC approving these amendments in their next meeting. And the next page, you will see the projects listed on the funding breakdown of these projects. That the 2 that will be added and the third one that will be deleted from the STIP, from the TIP, I mean, and the resolution to be signed by TAC. The next item is the.
Hey, Ilya, let me just ask if anyone has any comments or questions on item 4B, the addition of 2 bridges and the deletion of the third, but only because we're using alternate funds. Okay, if there are no comments, we'll move on to item 4C.
So in item 4C, that's page 10, we have the request from the city of Greenville to add a new project, public transportation project to the STIP. So we are requesting the TCC to recommend the TAC to adopt this resolution in support of that project. They are looking to replace 4 buses from their system, Greenville Area Transit. And since they're using a match of local and federal funds, they are required to be in the STIP and the TIP. And the next page is the resolution. And then the details of the project that we have for now.
And just a little history on this, FTA will replace buses after 12 years, but they do have to be in the STIP. This is a request by the Greenville Area Transit, Greenville, to replace 4 buses that are beyond their useful life. They're beyond 12 years.
So those are the items in the consent agenda.
So do we have any questions on items 4A, B, or C? Well, if there are no questions, do we have a motion to approve items 4A, 4B, and 4C?
This is Ann Wall, and I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda items 4A, B, and C.
Motion to approve by Ann Wall. Do we have a second?
Second, James Rhodes.
All right, a second by James Rhodes. We'll move on to item number 5. We'll take a roll call at the end of this.
And the next item, we will have our presenters, Kerry Morrow and or Jamie Vieira. They are coming from the traffic survey group to give us a presentation about the 2020 traffic counts down. And let's see. All right. Is Kerry?
Yep, I'm here. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yes. Would you like to share your screen, or would you like to use the slides?
Either way, you've got it up there, so I'm fine
Yeah.
with going off of your copy. If you want to
Okay,
just,
great.
I'll let you know when to advance.
That works.
All right, sounds good. I'll get started. Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Morrow. I'm with NCDOT Traffic Survey Group. And for those who may not know what we do, we collect traffic counts throughout the state, and we largely do that in-house with our own data collectors. And we do this primarily for the purpose of traffic monitoring, but there are many things, as LU well knows, there's many things that we do with traffic counts. So we actually collect counts for a lot of different reasons. But LU reached out to me and Jamie. It's just going to be me today. But reached out to us just to ask, that we kind of give you an explanation of our 2020 traffic count data, and kind of, what our process was, what some of the impacts of the pandemic were. And so we'll go through that, and I'll kind of explain some of that for the state and also for the Greenville area. Next slide. Okay, so in today's presentation, I'll go over first the pandemic impacts generally on our 2020 data collection, and then I'll go over how that specifically affected the Greenville urban area. Then I'll talk about, I'll go through some of the North Carolina travel trends that we saw during the pandemic, some of the impacts that had on 2020 data analysis. And then I forgot to edit that last bullet. I'm not going to talk about 2021. So next slide. Okay. So some of the impacts that the pandemic had on 2020 data collection. As I said, most of our data collectors we do in-house. So they work for our group, traffic survey group. And we did, it started out like a normal year, like it did for everyone else. And so we were collecting all the way up until early March. But all of the counts that we collected up until early March, we did not end up using because they really did not provide a measure of the impact of the pandemic on travel. So although we looked into it and we looked at the dates that we collected data, and Greenville is one of the areas where we did come out. We did about, I think it was 458 counts in the area, but we ended up not being able to use those counts because, again, it was a very crazy year, so that wasn't representative of 2020. Initially, we decided to suspend our data collection, so that affected our collection. So from about March till May, and that's kind of complicated. It was both health and safety related, as well as some of our HR policies. And we needed a little time to regroup and figure out, we no longer have time to collect an entire year data. So how are we gonna do this? Where are we gonna collect? So we brainstormed and we decided to collect a sample of stations across the state and have a measure of travel changes in all areas around the state. Next slide. So for short-term volume, the counts were collected at about 5,000 stations on non-interstate routes. And for our interstates throughout the state, we had sample counts collected along each corridor, each interstate corridor. For our continuous collection, so we have what we call continuous count stations At the time, we had about 100 of them in North Carolina. We've been growing over the past few years, so we have like somewhere in the 120s now. But at the time, about 100 stations throughout North Carolina. Those stations, they're outside of the roadway, they're non-intrusive, so those were not impacted by the pandemic, and they continuously count. So they're collecting traffic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. And we ended up heavily relying on this data. We were able to use this continuous data to factor our other collected data sets. Next slide. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the Greenville urban data in 2020. So this map shows specifically zoomed into the Greenville MPO boundary. So on the left, you see that figure. Typically what we would do in our urban collection, we would collect 555 stations, and that is a map of those stations that you see there. We only, in 2020, that was so limited, we only collected 66. So that kind of gives you a sense of, like a tenth of, or a little more than a tenth of what we normally do. Next slide. And then we kind of zoom out a little to all of Pitt County. So our typical Pitt County collection includes 956 stations. In 2020, we collected 157 stations. All right, next slide. I'll talk a little bit about some North Carolina trends. Next slide. This is just a map of our the continuous count stations that I mentioned. Early in the pandemic, our NCDOT executive leadership, Secretary Boyette, asked us to start weekly reporting our travel trends. So we developed a spreadsheet very quickly to, part of that was just because if you think about where our revenue comes from, the gas tax and people not getting gas. So that became very high importance. So we started developing a weekly spreadsheet to track our travel trends. This was largely based on these 100 or so continuous count stations. And we no longer do it in a spreadsheet. It's now on our NCDOT dashboard. Next slide. And here's just a kind of a snapshot. This is a graph I had done a while back for a previous presentation, actually, but this just kind of shows you, I think this goes from January of 2020 to July of 2021. But just to show you, the blue bars are North Carolina numbers and traffic data, and then the red line represents national traffic data. So as you can see, and as you would expect, we really plummeted. Travel went down significantly, the most significantly in April of 2020, right after the beginning of the pandemic, like at almost 45% less than normal traffic. But as you can see from the graph, we kind of incrementally recovered. And I didn't continue this graph until now, but we're near, we're not right at 2019 numbers, but we're pretty close to it. And it really helps that we have a more normal school year. And so commuter patterns have gotten a little bit back to normal, although many of us are still working in a virtual setting, so that still impacts things. Next slide. So do a little bit of a monthly comparison between 2019 and 2020 because 2019 was a typical year. So if we're looking at 2019 in that data set, there's always high variability stations, and those are on your recreational routes. So anything where there's any beaches, mountains, lakes, things like that, those are always going to be your high variability stations. Middle variability is going to be on your more rural routes. The flattest seasonal patterns are going to be on the urban routes because people generally, that commute, not much changes that commute pattern on urban routes. And this reflects a typical seasonal pattern, which is what we use to process our data in a typical year. Then looking at 2020, our typical travel, we had typical travel up until early March, and then from March to December, it was atypical. It got increasingly back to normal, but it was still atypical really all year long. once the restrictions were implemented in that March, April timeframe, it reduced travel up to 40%, 45%. And then as those restrictions were sort of eased, it was restored incrementally at the end of the year. Sorry, this is an old statistic that's in here, and I apologize. I meant to get that out of there. But at the end of the year, 10%, we were still about 10%. But that was the end of 2020, and now we're in 2022. So that's a pretty old statistic. We're closer to normal traffic patterns now. And one thing we'll note is that recreational travel dropped the most. You saw the sharpest drop, but it also recovered the most quickly because people needed to get out of their house and have fun. So next slide. All right, so how was 2020 data analysis impacted? So one thing I like to do is just to remind people, so many of you probably know this, but some may not, that, when I talk about an AADT, that's an annual average daily traffic. So that value is an estimated statistic that represents the average 24-hour traffic volume at a location for the full year. So I just want to make sure everyone understands estimated statistic is really key in understanding that, because, if you see, this road out here in front of me, I measure that, 3,780 cars drive by. That is not an AADT. That is a traffic volume. That is a daily traffic volume for a specific day, which is affected by the day of the week, possibly by the hours that, that count was taken. It may be affected by events, it may be affected by weather, and it's certainly affected by the time of the year. So those are a lot of different, things that factor into, into account. And so our job is to take data that we collect, short-term data that we collect, and apply different factors to annualize it to make it representative of travel for the whole year, for the average day, one day in the whole year. So that was a hard process, a very hard process, because that we have a standard process that we use every year, and that we were not able to do that in 2020 because nothing was typical. So, we were really in a quandary, but we kind of went through a process and looked at other states and figured out, what we needed to do to kind of make that happen. We have a federal deadline of, having to submit our AADT data to Federal Highway Administration. We were able to meet that in June of 2021, and then we published our 2020 AADT data just a couple of months ago in December. Which is very atypical. We typically publish it in maybe like August, September timeframe. So we were very delayed with that. Next slide. And this is probably the most technical kind of geeky slide I have, but this kind of talks about our methodology. For our counted stations, what we did was we ended up using a percent change model. And this is sort of a representation of that percent change model. So what we did, we took our 2020 day of week volumes and then our 2019 AADT volumes. Then we used so the ratio of 2020 counts to 2019 AADT was used as a basis for assigning the percent change in AADT between 2019 and 2020. We applied this methodology to all our non-interstate stations, but then there's a separate model, but it's still a percent change, and it's a very similar model but a separate one that we use for our interstate stations. Next slide. And that was what we did. So that last slide was what we did on our counted stations. Then we had, as I showed you for Pitt County and Greenville, there were a lot more uncounted stations than normal in 2020. So we estimated those, and this is something that you guys should know, that we estimate every year. So that's not something that's new, but we just don't usually estimate for most of our stations in a year. So that is something that was different about 2020. But we estimated using non-standard methods. But like I said, our methodology is consistent with methods that were used by other states, sort of state agencies, and we compared and got similar results. We do believe that they generate generate reasonable travel estimates, particularly at the statewide. The bigger you go, the broader you go, looking statewide. As you drill down, it's probably a little bit more less accurate, I'll say. And yeah, at the station, that last bullet, at the station level, you have data that's a lot less reliable because we just didn't collect enough, and we had to use these non-standard methods. Next slide. And when we published our data in December, we distributed a memo, and it was kind of a 2020 data impact of the pandemic memo. We sent this to all our customers that use our data, and the purpose was for us to provide transparency on how the pandemic affected our data collection and generation of AADTs. So and this is an actual link to the memo that's online. So if you guys are interested later, you can take a look at it. But on the next slide, I'll just say there's one section that we call action. We just tell our customers, traffic monitoring data customers should use the 2020 data set with knowledge that 2020 was a year of highly irregular traffic patterns, understanding that AADT values were largely estimated. Counts from this year represent a reasonable characterization of North Carolina travel, but may not be appropriate for long-range data projections. And I think next slide is just my last slide. And I'll take questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Carrie. That was informative. Can I ask you a question? What is sort of the criteria for establishing the continuous count stations? Is there one?
Yeah, I wish I had. I have a slide in a presentation I gave very recently. Basically, I'll just try to describe because we anticipated that question. I should have put it in here, but some of the criteria, basically what we are doing when we're trying to determine where we do continuous stations is trying to get the full spectrum, just trying to get stations that represent every type of travel, get, a wide variety of, both geographical representation. We want lower volume roads as well as higher volume roads. We want our interstate travel to be represented, and kind of everything in between. We want rural, we want urban, we want as many different types. So that's how we kind of make those decisions.
Gotcha. Not to put you on the spot, is there one of these continuous count stations in the Greenville MPO?
I can pass that information to Eliud. There's not currently, and in that map that I think Eliud's trying to go to, it shows that there is not. This map is from a couple, or at least from last year, maybe earlier. We have been growing. I don't remember. I'm thinking about my communications with my electronics team. I don't believe they've been to Pitt County recently, so we probably don't still have one. But I could check and see, because we have like a long list of ones that we're vetting. There's other factors like the terrain and the pavement, the right of way in an area. Right. So we also have to work with the local division or district offices to make sure that they approve the locations. So we have a list. I can check it out and let you know if there's one in Pitt County, and I can let Ellie know and pass that on to you.
I don't know if there's one that DOT has put up, but and Rick and Stacy can chime in, but we put up, instead of installing traffic loops, we have different controls for our traffic signals that, and Rick, do they normally collect traffic data? Is that right? Or does it not collect traffic counts?
Say again, Kevin?
Does our controllers for the traffic signals, forgetting the name of the manufacturer that we typically utilize,
Our controllers, no. They do not do data collection.
Okay.
Our Grid Smart Detection does.
Grid Smart, that's what I was trying to say.
Grid Smart Detection does.
And so is that active all the time? So it's currently collecting?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we do you may not, DOT may not have access to it, but certainly welcome to it. We do have some station
Yeah,
within.
and we are starting to talk more about, looking at, because there are lots of local entities that do their own collection. And we are looking at data sharing opportunities.
Great. All right. That's all I have. Any other questions for Ms. Morrow?
And this is Elliot. Question regarding the uses of the data and the caveats. Is this memo not just for outside DOT members or local government? Is this also for divisions? For
Yeah,
example,
for everyone, anyone who is using our data. Yeah, it's for anyone who uses our data.
because my question comes because I know that we did receive a presentation in our previous meetings from the safety unit, and they show us that they have funding priority cycles, that they submit projects, and of course they use this traffic data. And there's one that is biannual, and then there's another one that is quarterly. So I was just wondering how that is that part of the has the safety unit been aware of this, and how have they been able, if you're aware, how they manage to deal with the caveats?
Well, did they use, are you saying that they used our data or they had?
I'm not sure. That will be a question for my question is related to the coordination of acknowledging.
Gotcha. Honestly, I don't know. We don't, because we're producers and we're not customers. We don't always know who every single one of our customers are, but we know we have a lot of them. So sometimes, data is used in ways that we aren't always aware of. There's not any specific coordination with safety that I know of, but I mean, everyone throughout the department does. This is the official North Carolina, data set. So this memo would apply to any user. And I think I'd have to talk to them and see if it's the same data set.
And I wanted to mention to the members that I have discussed with Kerry about my concern of using this data for our next prioritization cycle. But by the next prioritization cycle, we will have new counts from 2022. So we're expecting that to resolve any issues regarding the assessment of the benefit, cost, and congestion criteria of our projects.
Right.
So thank you.
And I'll just say that I meant to say it while I was presenting, but just, when you see the variability, I think it was slide 10, just the graph that has, all that variability. When you think about in an annual, in a 12-month year, you go from January to December of 2020, and you see how it goes, up and down like that. We have the task of annualizing that, like making an average out of that. Anytime you do something like that, where you just have such atypical patterns, that's not something that's probably going to project forward. You can't, I do have a background in long range planning. If I were a planner, I would, if I was using it, I wouldn't use it. I would drop it entirely. That's what I would do. But you guys can make that decision. All we can do is endorse our own data. But yeah, that there's 2020 data should be really used with caution.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next presentation is from Diane Hampton. Is page 30 of the package. Is an update to our the statewide transportation improvement program, the STIP, and the prioritization process. I know it's an ongoing item within our agenda, and as new decisions are made by the board, I have been requesting the STIP unit and NCDOT, Diane in particular, to give us an update on what's the latest. And in these pages, you will have her presentation, and at the end, I created a table of our projects just to keep in context of how these changes apply to us. So Diane, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Elliot. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thanks for having me today for this STIP update. And this is an update which is a result of our working with stakeholders, the work group, and also the Board of Transportation. Next slide. This slide you've seen before. We've been showing it since October, and I'll just go over a couple of highlights. The total revenue in this picture is about $22 billion, and the total projected deficit is around 11.7 billion. So that means we're 11.7 billion in the hole. And I want to remind everybody, this is just a snapshot in time. So when we did this in October, that was the expected federal revenue, state revenue, and project costs. And as they stood in time, there was other things like alternate criteria projects, just for example, bridge projects as they stood at that time. Well, you know, the department doesn't stand still. We keep moving forward. So with our next slide, we've updated the picture with all the changes that have occurred since we've had the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act come about. And this is the latest data that we have with the new federal revenues projected out over 10 years into our 2024 through 33 STIP. It shows the latest state revenue projections based on the budget that was passed since the last time. And also it's got any kind of cost changes or impacts on the programming side. A number of items have changed since then. Again, we've had new bridge projects or additional bridge projects in some divisions that are considered alternate criteria that impact the specific division tier funding or regional tier funding in those divisions. And we've had cost increases from low bid adjustments. We've had cost increases from projected cost increases due to inflation. And we're going to go to our projected revenues are now around $26.7 billion versus the just under 22 under the old slide. And the deficits went from around 11.7 billion to around 8 billion. So this picture here is just about $3.7 billion better than the one in July, but it's not quite as high as what you would expect with all the revenue, because again, we haven't stopped in the meantime. There's been other cost changes, and also we've put an additional $600 million tucked away for inflation in the future. So that's been taken out of the budget. We've had to tie up additional holdouts for bridge projects, safety projects, rail projects, the local dollars, STB, GDA dollars, TAP funds. And when I say holdouts, even though the federal dollars have increased, so a lot of the other different items on the federal side have increased too. And some of those, we put holdouts into the STIP because some of the programs are alternate criteria. They have their own criteria. And a good example is the funding that the large MPOs get that comes out of the division tier funds. And then some of the other buckets have to make an adjustment for that. So with all this said, I'm going to take a quick pause to see if we have any questions.
And this is Elliot. I just wanted to mention out of this table in the regional impact, our region is region B. And,
yes.
And these are our numbers.
Correct.
And within division, we are division 2. So these are correct. Our numbers compared to the state, to the other parts of the state, I mean.
And you can see we are over-programmed in every level in our division, in our region, and statewide. Okay, let's go to the next slide. There was a work group meeting back in December, and I'll go through this pretty quickly because we spent a lot of time talking about this over the last few months. We're kind of getting to the end piece of this phase. And again, it's not been an easy process, but it's been a methodical process as we work. So again, just to set the stage, the work group recommendations to the board, and the board approved these overall goals when we first started. Everybody wants a trustworthy and dependable STIP, one that's fiscally constrained. We want a STIP that's produced using our current project list. We want to be able to do that transparently. We all want to have an opportunity to fund new projects in the next cycle, P 7.0. And I think that goes without saying, our process should be and shall be grounded in state and federal laws and requirements. We did change the term to delivery projects from held harmless. And even now, I don't know if that's a great term. And there's been a lot of conversation about that with the board members, but that's the terminology that we use. We're trying to do a better job of thinking that through as we move forward. Next slide. This is a decision guide showing what decisions have been made in the future under this process. And that's just a legend showing what will happen on the next slide. So we're going to follow that traditional STIP development method. The work group recommended and the board agreed on scenario 2 approach for those delivery projects. And then the next point of decision was that the board agreed to was the work group's recommendation that we do the P3, P4, P5 approach with flexibility to fill in the rest of the buckets. Next slide. And what that means is, then there's an old slide here, and I've got an updated one. So let's go to the old one first. We were trying to figure out a process to use to fill up the green part of these bar charts. The blue part is what you call the delivery projects, and the green part is what will be room for the P70 projects. And this is a little bit different than what you've seen before. Next slide. This is a newer one. This shows what the funding looks like based on the new revenue projections. And you can see the green part is a little different than the last slide. So statewide, from the last slide, we went up 28%, and that's about 2.7 billion total. Next slide. So the work group recommended a P3, P4, P5 approach. So what that means is we would start with the oldest projects first. The projects were committed under prioritization 3.0, and that was the 2016 to 25 STIP. We would sort projects by highest score to lowest score in descending order and work our way down the list, putting the project in each appropriate bucket as you work down. If funding remained available in any bucket, you repeat that process for projects that were committed in P40 and then P5. If that bucket runs out of funding, you just skip that bucket and go on to the next one. And again, the flexibility opportunities for funded projects, which I'm going to talk about. Next slide. So real briefly about that, the bottom line is we feel that all these projects at one point were funded, they all got prioritized, they were selected for funding. And so we think that each area of the state should have an opportunity if projects that are more important to them that didn't make the cut. Using that process, they should have an opportunity to swap it with the project that did make the cut. So the project that isn't selected for funding could be swapped with other projects that were selected for funding. And I do want to remind people, though, it doesn't mean it will keep the specific same schedule. The swap could work out, but the new project may have a slightly different schedule because of delivery issues or something like that. So the schedule may change slightly. All swaps must be agreed to by the department and any affected MPO or RPO where that project is located. In general, the cost of the projects or projects swapped in can't be more than 10% higher than the cost of the project swapped out. The swap should generally occur within the same funding category. However, there's an opportunity to cascade down. The STI law allows cascading down, so we're allowing it too. So you could swap out a regional tier project and swap in a statewide project as an example, or swap out a division tier project and swap in a regional tier project. So you can cascade down, not cascade up. We would allow swaps between modes as long as the normalization percentages are still met. And if you don't know what that is, it's the minimum 90% highway, minimum 4% mode, and then 6% is a flexible percentage with the remaining 6% based on scores. So as long as you still meet those minimum scores at each bucket, you could do those swaps. We do expect the divisions, as they work with the MPOs, they're looking to swap out across modes. They coordinate with the modal managers. Just an example, if it's a bike ped project, they should coordinate with Ryan Rumfield and his staff to make sure that everybody is on the same page moving forward. And going back to the visibility, any swaps, or in fact, this whole process has to be documented, which will be made available to the public. And so they can understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who agreed to it. Next slide. The second thing we want to talk about is where do you draw that line on projects for the next cycle? P70. Next slide. Which projects are subject to report prioritization and which projects are not? The work group talked about a number of different scenarios and ultimately, and quite frankly, very quickly came to recommend option B there on your screen, the 5-year line. That's where the work group recommended to the board. This goes way back to the way we did it in P3, P4, but in P5, the work group recommended the 6-year line. So that's what we did in P5. The board is still thinking about this 5-year line, and they have not made a decision yet on that, but we expect to hear something in the spring. Next slide.
Hey, Diane, could I ask, could you just explain that recommendation or what that is to
The 5-year
the group?
line?
Yep.
That is typically the line that divides, and we used to call it committed projects versus developmental projects. So now they're calling them delivery projects. So those would be the ones that are funded for sure, and funds will not be taken away. And the ones beyond that 5-year line would have to go through reprioritization.
So if you wanted to swap out a project that's within the 5-year line, is that eligible or no?
That's a good question.
Yeah, according to the new changes, and this is very important to keep in mind, as long as they are in the step, there's they could be swapped with projects that were non-committed.
As long as what hasn't occurred, as long as construction hasn't started, as long as right of way hasn't proceeded, like where is the? It probably has to go to the board, but where would DOT's recommendation be when you could no longer swap a project, when that project is too far into motion?
And I don't know if they've really talked about that yet, but just in my engineer mind, I would be thinking that if you're already bought right away, that would be from the point of no return.
And I will say
it's pretty far along,
They haven't, at least in the conversations that I have been participating, they haven't mentioned the draw line.
Gotcha.
They have mentioned, and they keep mentioning that this is an option for us of swapping the non-committed projects with the committed projects. But I could reach out to the work group just to see if there's actually more details about it.
I think that's a very good question, though, because you would waste a lot of money if you've already designed a project and already have shovels in the ground and you decide you don't want it. Do you have one in mind?
No. And I wouldn't say any local would be saying they don't want it. Maybe they just want another one ahead of that one.
Right. I think we'll have to have some detailed discussions later on about this.
Yeah.
That's a very good question.
And I think this is what Diane was leading to. The oncoming months, those conversations will take place. So we are expecting more information.
Yes, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about the swapping and flexibility with the MPOs and the work group and the RPOs and local governments across the state. So just to quickly summarize the next steps, the STIP managers are going to begin developing what we're calling the preliminary draft STIP. We've already started talking to our communications folks to develop messaging on how we explain this to people. We're also looking to develop partner education that'll be rolled out this spring, and that'll be kind of twofold. One would be more of a technical type education for the MPOs and RPOs, the staff members. They would come to this and we would sit down with them and go over all the items that we will discuss. And then the second part is going to be more of a higher level for your elected officials, town managers, and those that aren't as involved in the process. But they still need to know the basics. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do that moving forward. So we're starting to work on that too. And of course, whatever we do, not only is it the right thing to do, which it is, we're also required under state and federal law to involve the public. So we're talking about moving schedules, taking funds off of projects and swapping projects. And the public will be involved in that and should be involved in that. And we're starting to have those conversations too. How was this process different from what we normally do? And what are we doing to develop a STIP? And probably one of the most important things is once we get that preliminary draft STIP developed, there will be ongoing meetings between the department, MPOs, RPOs. And we see this as being a months-long process, mainly because even though the MPOs, RPOs that meet monthly, you bring something to the board as information, they think about it, and you come back next month and they vote on it, and they give you a direction. So at a minimum, we're talking about a 2 or 3 month process, but many of the MPOs and RPOs don't even meet monthly. So some of them meet every other month or quarterly. So they'll have to have their own public involvement period rolled into that too. So I'd say at a minimum, 3 to 4 months, but it's more likely 4 to 6 months to get through all the coordination meetings and the swap discussions. So that puts us into the late summer or fall timeframe to get all this worked out. And if there's any questions or any more questions, I'll be happy to take those.
And thank you, Diane. And I would like to add that page 46, it has the list of this table. We have seen this table before. Our TCC has seen it in December, and I think in October a version of it. In this table shows all the projects committed and non-committed within the MPO. The first 5 group are based on the selection method that we discussed, that the board decided on in November or December of scenario 2. So these are the projects that are moving forward, and they are calling used to be called the held harmless. Now they're delivery projects. And then what the board has recently approved is the method that we showed the draft version during our December meeting of P3, P4, P5, going down those scorings and seeing which projects fall within those funding pots. The projects in green are the ones that are likely to be funded with this next step. And then the ones in yellow, beige are the projects that are not so far. So they are, the projects that fall off of that list will be reevaluated in the next prioritization process. So I included all this, plus I added below the projects that were non-committed. These are the projects that we have discussed of. These are other swapping candidates. As you see there, that is the Stevensburg Road project, the Evans Street access management, that is from Red Banks to 5th Street. The 10th Street project from Oxford to Evans, and NC43 Charles Boulevard from Bells Fork to Greenville Boulevard, and NC33 from Black Simpson Road all the way to Mobliss Bridge Road. These are the funding categories that is very important to understand, because the system in place so far, it makes it easier to swap within the same categories of division funds compared to regional funds. These are the estimates in millions of the projects, and these are so far in the step the programming, the dates that they have assigned the right of way. Based on that deadline, that line that Diane mentioned of FY28 or sooner, we're hoping to get more information. But so far, all our projects fall within the same group. All the projects that are that were committed before and they are being reevaluated. I'm not talking about the non-committed. All those projects are either 28 or sooner in terms of the first year for the right of way.
Elliot, is that the first 5 projects or the first 10 projects?
All 10 projects.
All 10. All right. So I brought this up maybe last time, but it would be, we wouldn't want 5917 done ahead of 5670 and 5765, right? To widen 14th without addressing Fire Tower would just exacerbate the traffic issues at Fire Tower. So they're listed as 3 projects, but I'm assuming they'd all be done in coordination.
And yes, but we haven't, at least in terms of the rules of swapping or the order of programming, those are the things that we will be discussing with the work group. And the problem that they have, of course, is the rule that they create, it has to apply for everybody in order to keep transparency. So we might be, depending on how they set up the rules, we might be in that difficult situation of maybe 14th Street might start first, but still is ongoing and is flexible. Of course, I will share the sentiments from Greenville about these projects to the work group.
I would certainly recommend that project be done at the tail end of Fire Tower, as opposed to the beginning. So, well, more to come on that, right? Before we find out for sure.
Yes. The goal is to adopt the STIP by the end of the year. So this year we will have, you will expect from me some email correspondence, and definitely by the next TCC meeting in June, we will have a presentation about this. Okay. If not, we will have something sooner. It will depend on how DOT wants to approach this engagement.
Well, just, first year construction, first year CON, that column shows the same year for each of those projects. So I think obviously folks at DOT have thought that through. All right. If there's no questions or comments for Dan, we can move on to the next item.
So the next item is 5C. This is the self-certification for the Greenville Urban Area MPO transportation planning process for this new year, fiscal year 2023. It is part of our requirements, and the federal government actually allow us to self-certify MPOs that are non-TMAs. So those are MPOs that are less than 200,000 residents. This is we present this to the TCC every year. What you see attached is those checklists going over our planning process, saying that we are in compliance. Those are page 47 that explains the item, and then 48 up to 50 are it is the self-certification document. And then in page 51 is the resolution. We are requesting the TCC to recommend the TAC, the adoption of this resolution, and then going to the process of self-certifying our planning practices that are in compliance with the federal and state regulations. Does anybody has any questions?
Ilya, the action needed, we need to recommend that TAC adopt the resolution that the Greenville Urban Area MPO self-certify its planning practices and process, that they're compliant with all applicable federal and state regs. Do we need to take a motion here?
Yes, if there's no questions, yeah, this is an action item.
All right, do we have a motion to approve it, item 5C?
Yes, this is James Rhodes. So moved.
All right, James Rhodes has made a motion. Do we have a second?
Steve Hamilton, second.
Excellent. Steve Hamilton with the second. Rich, we will now move on to the next item. Item 5D, which is approval of the Greenville Urban Area MPO's fiscal year 2023 Unified Planning Work Program.
Yes, and I wanted to mention the roll call will be moved to the later vote unless there's any if there's any suggestions from the members, any vote against. But yes, this item 5D is the adoption of our new planning work program, and attached to this packet, page 50 on, is the item describing our future projects or tasks, and also the draft document. The whole document is there from page 53 all the way to 70. This is the Unified Planning Work Program, as you may know, is the federally mandated document that we gather all the activities that the MPO will do, all the expenditures anticipated by the MPO the coming year. We also host any program study that has received federal funds related to transportation. So you will see 5303 funds within that document. The document is living document, of course. If the committee thinks that there's a new item, a new study that could be using MPO funds, and we have the funding availability, we will be able to discuss that, and by the next meeting or future TCC meetings and TAC meetings, we could amend the document. And among the projects and special studies anticipated for 2023, we have the Pitt County Comprehensive Transportation Planning Update. We also have the transportation component of Pitt County Land Use Plan. And during this year, we are updating our travel demand model, and that we are required to update every 5 years ahead of our long range plan, our MTP update. And the plan, of course, includes a 5-year work plan and the other documents required as part of the planning work program. Does anybody has any questions about the document?
Yeah, just one question from me. I did, from the state, we learned that the 5303 funding potentially has some additional funds. I guess we can, as you indicated, we can deal with that via an amendment later in the at our next meeting, or see the 5303, it has 43,000 in it, and we saw that the 5303 may have as much as 80,000 available to us.
Okay, and I think we could add that caveat to the recommendation from the TCC. So the TAC could, since TAC will see this in March 16, we could add the amendments and put the draft planning work program, because this at this stage is a draft version. It has not been adopted by the TAC. That's why I'm bringing it to the TCC. If there's any comments or changes, we could carry them now, or we could carry them as amendments once we are once it is adopted.
Okay. Just to, well, if we can bring it to the TAC with the amended number, that would be for March, that would be great. But the trying to work through the screens from the state, we understand that the 53 funds are $88,234, which will break that up into program support, administration, regional planning, the Transportation Improvement Program, as well as safety and training. And currently, I think it shows 43,000.
Yeah.
Elliot, I had a quick question. This is James. I noticed that the funding allocation on the spreadsheet for the county's land use plan update doesn't quite jive with the requested amount. And I'm just wondering, is that because it's split over 2 planning work program years, or why is that?
What was the requested amount for the?
It was an even 35.
Even 35? Oh.
Yeah. And it's a minor amount, but I was just wondering, I know we've got it on the current work program too.
Isn't that what's on the?
Yeah, I see 35,000 in the, at least in the, if you go to the page where this is the summary page of the funding, and at the bottom we put 35,000. Isn't that the correct amount?
Yeah, I guess I was just looking up at the top line under special studies. So that's what I was looking at.
Oh, the item special studies is either used for at least assigned right now for any staff time committed to management of any special studies, but it could be used for in the future for studies as well. If any of the members have a study in mind, of course, we're about to also discuss in the coming weeks with the jurisdiction some ideas.
Very good. Thanks for that clarification.
All right, any other comments on this item, Elliot?
No, there are no comments. We are requesting the TCC to recommend the TAC to adopt this planning work program, and this is the resolution they will be signing.
All right, so for item 5, this is 5D. 5D, do we have a motion to approve?
Brian Jones, so moved.
Brian Jones with a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
It's Mike Taylor, second.
And Mike Taylor with the second. At this time, I don't think there are any other items to approve. So Rachel, I think we could probably take a roll call. Unless, of course, do we need to take a roll call for adjourning the meeting?
Yes.
So
Mr. Chair, that's your prerogative. You can close the meeting if you so desire.
That sounds great. So let's take a roll call here, and then we'll move on with some of the other informative items.
Kevin Mulligan,
Aye.
Shante Gooby,
Aye.
Rick DeCesar,
Caesar, yes.
Ken Graves,
Ken Graves, yes.
James Rhodes,
James Rhodes, yes.
Jonas Hill,
Jonas Hill, yes.
Michael Taylor,
Mike Taylor, yes.
Brian Jones,
Brian Jones, yes.
Stephen Smith,
Stephen Smith, yes.
Liam Hogan Rivera,
Liam Hogan Rivera, yes.
Lynn White,
Lynn White, yes.
Bailey Harden,
Bailey Harden, yes.
Kevin Richards,
Kevin Richards, yes.
and William Bagnell.
Bill Bagnell, yes.
Pete Hamilton, yes.
I got you, Steve. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is that everyone? Rachel?
Yep.
Okay. All right, all of the motions previously carried, and we'll move on to other discussion items and updates and announcements from Division 2. Len White and Diane Hampton.
All right, Kevin. I think Elliot had it popped up. There it goes. That's the fiscal year 22 resurfacing plan. And also the next one is the 23 resurfacing plan. And the only caveat to these two sheets is if the trend of the fuel prices continues, if it approaches $4, $5, there'll probably be some adjustments made in the packages. So we'll just have to play that by ear as we go forward. I think Diane also sent in the construction reports. You can look through that to see what's going on in the county. And as far as I-587 upgrade, when ASHTO approved 264 to be re-signed to 587, that also included 264 alternate. So all that'll be done simultaneously. So there won't be an alternate anymore. It'll be 264 where the alternate is now. But that'll be coming later this year, probably into next year, unless Steve has more information on that. If you do, Steve, jump in.
The only one thing is the 264 will be coming in through Farmville, and then it'll turn and go north along the north or southwest bypass at 13. 264 alternate Greenville Boulevard will still stay in place.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have. Diane, do you have anything?
No, thank you, Lynn. You covered it quite well.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is James. Lynn, again, when exactly are those road names changing? Because that's going to change some of our addressing and road names out in the county. So is there a firm date as to when they should toggle over?
I'm going to defer that to Steve if he knows, because I do not know, or Bailey may have an idea.
We technically, I guess it is changed, but the signing hasn't been done. And we don't have a firm date yet because we don't have a projected delivery date on the signs from Prison Enterprises.
And James, I would like just to mention that this is the latest. I think this is the last ASHTO meeting when they reviewed this, and we were waiting on the response. So Steve and Len were able to give us an update on the latest, and they have recently approved this, and so we haven't received any updates on when. Once it's approved, we will then know more about it. And Len, I have a question regarding the bridge project over Tar River 38 going northbound on Memorial Drive. The project is B4786. It was set for FY22. Is there any updates on the replacement?
The last I heard, as of a week ago, it's to be let in May. It's ready to go if the airport, there's a little hang up there with a piece of property, piece of right of way. They're working with the airport on it now, but as of last week, it's ready if they can get that ironed out.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item, which is Transportation Planning Division, Liam Hogan Rivera.
Hello. I'm going to just share my screen. I wasn't able to. Is that possible, Elliot?
Yes. Give it a try now that I stopped sharing.
Okay. Awesome. So I have a newsletter here. Hope everyone could see. So from now on, I'll be able to get these over. We just got a new template, but I'll be able to get these over to Elliot so we can get this included in the packet next time. So you were able to hear a presentation about traffic forecast, those counts. So if you do have any interest in any traffic counts in the future, just let me know and I can get with Carrie to see if we can get some counts for any specific roads you may have in mind. The Pitt County CTP, as you know, that is going on currently. Well, right now we're working on finalizing the bike and ped map. And we've started working on that report as well. So in the next steps, we'll start discussing some public involvement, and you can be on the lookout for those different locations that once we solidify, we'll have those locations and dates for public involvement. And again, you can stay up to date with a lot of this on the Pitt County website. And in the newsletter, you'll also see some different updates with FHWA. Here we have the bike route system updates. Right now, they're looking for different public input that could help with the new bike route guidelines that we're trying to work with. And then we have some new improvements for some travel apps, and it's discussing the appreciation with getting some information in when it comes down to a lot of the new construction that may or may not be happening on certain roads, so that we can give live updates on the NCDOT website. And then we have a link here as well from the Transportation Summit sessions, and you'll see a lot of links throughout the newsletter. So you can see some YouTube videos from some of those meetings you may or may not have been able to attend. And then in the end, we'll be having some upcoming important dates. And then all of the other statewide plan links as well to other plans that are currently going on, so that you can stay up to date. And again, I'll have this emailed out so that you're able to get this great info and be able to follow some of these links. And for the next future meetings, this will also be in the packet. So if you have any questions or any comments, my information is also in the green box here, my email and my contact number. Thank you.
And Leon, thank you for the update. I wanted to mention that I will be able to, there were some tweaks for the traffic count data presentation that I received an updated version. And I will just add your TPD updates to the package, and I will send it back. I'll send the updated link to the members for the reference.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Liam, for the presentation. Next, we have a discussion item, Integrated Mobility Division from Nick Morrison.
Yeah, hey guys, good afternoon. This is Nick Morrison, Transportation Planner with Integrated Mobility Division. Just had a couple of updates. One being the Complete Streets Connect page has been updated and now reflects the new training materials along with guidance documents and infographics. On that Connect page, the registration is still open for the final scheduled training session on that Complete Streets policy, and that's being held this Friday, the 25th, from 10 to 11:30. If you were unable to attend any of the previous sessions or not able to attend this one on Friday, you can reach out directly to NCDOT and schedule an additional session. And those sessions are geared mostly towards project management staff and external stakeholders to kind of go through that new implementation methodology, and also walks through some specific projects to kind of provide a better context to the framework that's been updated. Additionally, the FY23 TDM call for projects was released last week. So that is open until March 18th. Application instructions along with the application materials are available on that TDM Connect page. If you have any specific questions regarding that, I know there have been a couple of changes and revisions to that program since the prior funding year. You can reach out directly to John Vinehodge or Blair Chambers with IMD. I'm going to skip over the Watch For Me program since that deadline has passed. With the RAISE grants, we have been advised that IMD can assist with some of those applications, and since that grant opportunity is now open. IMD staff can provide technical support for those applications. For example, we're working with one of our MPOs on resubmitting a raise application for this round. IMD also has the ability to submit select projects on behalf of our local partners. We haven't received any guidance on that from management yet, but just wanted to pass that opportunity and option along if people are interested. And then Liam touched on the update to the bicycle route system. There's a public input map that's available at that link there. And that's again open until March 14th. And you can provide direct comment to the consultant team that's working on that update. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to mention, this is Ellie. Thank you, Nick. Nick Morrison is our new Integrated Mobility Division planner. He will be attending our meetings and he could provide us updates if we have questions regarding to the non-highway movement, not bike ped mostly, transportation, public transportation. He will be our go-to person. And question, Nick, this NC bicycle route system update, they are accepting feedback until March 14. Is this the first stage of different, just like Great State Trail plan, that there were different phases for feedback, or are they just looking for a brief feedback and there's no plan for other public engagement?
That's a good question. I can touch base with John and see like what the specific, kind of time frame is moving forward. It's not something that I've been intimately involved in, but I can touch base and see what, again, their plan is moving forward. I know the wiki map that's up now is just looking at those state routes again, and it's fairly generalized comments, where you can, if there's specific points or line segments that people feel like need to be adjusted on the existing route network, and then pointing things out. But yeah, I can circle back and see if there's kind of a more detailed plan for future engagement touch points. And you'll notice my typo there. It says NCDOT is not initiating an update. That should say now initiating an update. So I apologize for not catching that.
All right, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Iliad. Off to you, MPO staff updates.
Yes, in page 90, you will see some federal grants and opportunities that I wanted to share with the members. Just to keep them in mind, and this is just a conversation started. Hopefully, we will get reach out to me if you're interested in participating, and we will see how the MPO will assist you. The first is, of course, the race grant. This used to be known as Build Grant and Tiger. The application is open. The deadline is April 14. There's more to this grant. There are webinars out there of how to fill the application. I encourage you to search FHWA USDOT website and write and follow these links, and you will find resources just to inform the jurisdictions if whether or not it will be a grant that might fit their needs. Keep in mind that this year is the budget is the funding available for this grant is 1.5 billion. That's a 50% increase from last year. So we haven't seen an increase like that. And the webinars kind of go into details of what you need to be mindful. Just speaking from experience, is a reimbursement grant. And I think one of the webinars that I attended, there's a minimum of 5 million in the project. So keep that in mind. The next page is is something, an executive order, and we hope to maybe get more information about this. This is with the goal of promoting access to voting. The USDOT FHWA is focusing on minimizing the delays and to access polling sites involving underserved or disadvantaged communities. So if you have identified areas that lead to traffic congestions during election time, we will be happy to please send it to me, and we will discuss with our USDOT's Connect staff that they will work with us and NCDOT to find solutions and funding opportunities. Keep in mind that the one thing that I will mention is it includes not just vehicular travel. If there's any impediment for any non-highway movement, such as lack of sidewalk connections that leads ADA compliance that leads to these places, that could be something that we could discuss. And hopefully, if you have any of those, please reach out to me. The next is a new funding opportunity for electric vehicle charging stations. This funding, all the information is available in the website driveelectric.gov. My knowledge of this fund is limited. I recently was aware of this, and the goal is to create an electric vehicle charging network. So there's funds available for charging stations. I know that in the past, like 4 years ago, we had other grants from the Volvo settlement. So if any of the members are interested and they would like to submit, please use these resources and reach out to us if there's any data that the MPO could either collect or provide. And does anybody has any questions regarding the federal updates? Okay. So the next
Go ahead, Iliad. Take us through.
Okay. The next item is local. I will just give an update of what I have been working on. We have been discussing with the safety unit some possibilities to do safety studies within our jurisdiction, trying to reach those safety targets. We have been also involved in the SP&R application for a passenger rail study, feasibility study from Raleigh to Greenville. It has been in our plans and actually been in the plans along the planning organizations between Raleigh and here. So we have been working on that application, and we hopefully will get updates, an update for whether or not we are granted the funds by May, and that will prompt an amendment to our FY23 planning work program. We do not know the breakdown. We do not know if it will be required for us to provide any matching PL funds. I know that it will require local funds. So once those details are available, I will reach out and set another meeting with the jurisdictions. And the other item is our TCC meetings. I know that we have. I would like to know from the TCC members which format will they prefer. I know that the restrictions have been lifted and meetings have been changing to in person, and I have reached out to other MPOs, and some of them are keeping their TCC and TAC meetings virtual. Some of them are at this moment not ready to make that decision, but they will likely do transition to in person. So I would like to know the committee's interest in continue doing virtual meetings or meeting in person.
Maybe if you have an opinion one way or another, you could send an email to Iliad. Just respond to his agenda email, what your preference is, and we can go from there.
Yeah, please. Our next meeting, as you have it in the agenda at the bottom, is June 15. our TAC meets soon, March 16. If I could get any feedback from the TCC members to understand what the incline will be, either the liking of virtual or keeping it or changing it back to in person. We will be happy to discuss that and share that with the members, maybe between meetings. I will then update everyone by email.
How about we put this out there, June 15th, next TC meeting will be in person unless folks want to keep it as a virtual. If they want to keep it as a virtual, send an email to Elliot. All right. I think that's all the items. Just review that MPO meeting schedule at your convenience. That item number 7. Item number 8, we are adjourned. Unless there's any other questions or comments, we will adjourn this meeting. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Rachel. We'll talk to everyone soon. All right.
Elliot, did you want us to stay